All right, you're tuning in, so clearly you've got a thirst for knowledge that your TikTok feed just isn't quenching. Today, we're mainlining some hard truths about a part of the world that consistently delivers drama, India and Pakistan. Picture this. April 2025. Kashmir, usually known for its stunning views, becomes a scene straight out of a disaster movie. Tourists in Pahalgam are suddenly caught in a terrorist attack. Boom, bodies everywhere. And faster than you can say geopolitical nightmare, these two nuclear-armed neighbors are back in their favorite pastime, threatening each other.
It was like watching a pressure cooker finally blow its lid.
Yeah.
Missiles were allegedly doing cross-border deliveries. Fighter jets were playing chicken in the skies and drones. Let's just say the air traffic controllers were having a really bad month.
Seriously.
Diplomatic niceties went out the window faster than free pizza at a tech startup. Treaties. Ripped to shreds.
Indeed.
India, in a move that raised more than a few eyebrows, suspended the Indus Waters Treaty, a decades-old agreement that's basically the plumbing of the region.
Wow, really? That treaty survived wars before, didn't it?
It did. And Pakistan, well, not to be outdone in the treaty trashing department, binned the Simla Agreement. It was a diplomatic bonfire.
A bonfire of epic proportions. And let's be real, this isn't some random Twitter beef that blew up. This is the latest installment in a family feud that goes way back all the way to the messy divorce that was the 1947 partition.
Exactly. We're talking about generations of side-eye, passive-aggressive diplomatic statements, and the occasional full-blown military tantrum.
So this deep dive isn't just about the fiery headlines of 2025.
No, we're digging down to the bedrock of this animosity. The historical grudges, the specific sparks that ignited this latest blaze, and why this all has the wreck of the world sweating. Because, and this is a detail you really need to remember, both India and Pakistan have nukes.
Right, that's the big one.
It's like two toddlers having a shouting match while holding live grenades.
Seriously, the stakes are higher than my rent in this city. We've been drowning in the deets news reports, history deep cuts, official pronouncements, the whole 9 yards. Our mission, should you choose to accept it, you already have, you're listening, is to give you the essential context, to figure out the why behind the kaboom, and to ponder what this all means for the global neighborhood.
Okay, let's unpack this historical baggage, shall we?
Let's do it. Let's start with the original sin, the moment the stage was set for all this drama. The 1947 partition. Britain, in its infinite wisdom, decided to carve up India into Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan.
Think of it as a rushed DIY project with catastrophic consequences.
Rushed is an understatement. It was like they had a pizza cutter and a weekend deadline.
Yeah, and this hasty carving led to a migration of biblical proportions, millions upon millions uprooted, and the violence. We're talking anywhere from 500,000 to maybe even 1 million people butchered in communal riots. It was brutal.
It was horrific. And what's fascinating, in a grim sort of way, is how that initial trauma became baked into the national identities of both countries. The horrific memories of partition, the displacement, the sheer brutality, it became a foundational myth, you know.
A shared wound. Exactly.
Yeah.
A shared wound that shaped how they saw themselves and, crucially, how they saw each other. For India, it reinforced the idea of a secular nation challenged by religious division, while for Pakistan, it solidified the need for a distinct Muslim state, often defining itself in opposition to India's Hindu majority.
It's a generational inheritance of suspicion and hostility, just baked right in. So this original sin just keeps on giving, huh? And then to really spice things up, you've got Kashmir, the issue that just refuses to go away. It's like that annoying guest who overstays their welcome by about 7 decades.
Right. What's the deal with Kashmir that makes it such a perpetual powder keg?
Yeah, what is it?
Well, right after partition, the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir was in a bit of a limbo. It had a Muslim-majority population, but was ruled by a Hindu Maharaja, Hari Singh. Initially, he was playing the field, hoping for independence.
Trying to stay out of it.
Kinda. But when Pakistan-backed tribal militias decided to pop over for an uninvited visit in October 1947, he ran to India for help and agreed to join India in exchange for some much-needed military backup.
So India swoops in like a Bollywood hero, things get messy, and everyone throws their hands up and says, let's take this to the UN.
Pretty much, yeah. By 1949, the UN managed to broker a ceasefire, drawing a line in the sand, the line of control, or LOSI, that effectively split Kashmir between Indian and Pakistani administration.
Okay, so it divided the place.
But the UN also made a promise of a plebiscite, a vote for the Kashmiri people to decide their own future. Spoiler alert, that vote never happened.
And that unfulfilled promise is like a political hangnail, constantly being picked at, right? Pakistan keeps bringing it up on the international stage, and a whole lot of Kashmiris are understandably feeling disenfranchised.
Absolutely. So Kashmir isn't just about territory. It's a massive symbol. For Pakistan, having a Muslim-majority region within India challenges its very raison d'etre as a Muslim homeland.
It challenges their identity.
Precisely. This need for a distinct Muslim identity has historically made the presence of a large Muslim-majority region within Hindu-majority India a fundamental challenge to its national narrative.
And for India,
losing Kashmir wouldn't just be a territorial loss. It could embolden other separatist movements and potentially tarnish its secular image. It's ideologically loaded for both sides.
okay, so we've got this historical baggage, this unresolved territorial dispute. Fast forward a bit. What's the deal with this insurgency period and the infamous Article 370? These seem to be key ingredients in the current spicy dish.
Good point. In 1989, an armed rebellion against Indian rule erupted in Indian-administered Kashmir. India's immediate reaction was to point the finger at Pakistan, accusing them of providing training, weapons, and support to the insurgents. This conflict has tragically claimed tens of thousands of lives over the years.
A long, simmering conflict.
Yeah. Then, in August 2019, India made a really bold move. They revoked Article 370 of their constitution. This article had granted special autonomous status to Jammu and Kashmir, allowing it to have its own constitution and a degree of independence in its governance.
So it had special status.
It did. Along with revoking Article 370, the state was reorganized into two centrally administered union territories.
That's not just tweaking the rules, that's rewriting the whole playbook, right?
Seismic is the word. India argued it was about finally integrating Kashmir fully into the Indian Union and curbing separatism. Pakistan, predictably, saw it as an illegal annexation, a violation of international law and the rights of the Kashmiri people.
Huge diplomatic fallout.
Oh yeah, it led to a significant downturn in relations. Diplomatic ties were downgraded and trade was suspended. This really raises an important question. Was this a strategic move to consolidate control, or was it a deliberate poke in the eye designed to provoke a response?
Right. It's all about whose side of the border you're standing on. One side's national integration is the other side's occupation. So we've got the bad blood, the contested land, the internal rebellion, and then, of course, actual wars. How many times have these two gone at it with actual armies?
Far too many. The historical record shows that repeated wars and military standoffs have only deepened the cycle of mistrust and animosity.
Lay it on me, the quick and dirty version of their greatest hits.
All right, first up, the First Kashmir War, 1947-48. Cause: Pakistan-backed tribal invasion leading to the Maharaja's accession to India. Result: UN ceasefire and the division of Kashmir along the Low Sea. Basically institutionalized the split.
Okay, war number one.
Then you've got the 1965 war. Pakistan's bright idea was Operation Gibraltar to infiltrate Indian-administered Kashmir and incite a rebellion. Didn't quite work out. Result: a stalemate, another ceasefire, the Tashkent Declaration. Basically put things back to pre-war borders, but it really highlighted Kashmir as the core flashpoint and showed military action was an option.
So no resolution there either. And then 71, that's the one where Bangladesh came into being, right? That must have been a massive shakeup.
Absolutely. East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, was fighting for its independence, and India threw its weight behind them. The outcome was a decisive Indian victory and the creation of Bangladesh. Huge humiliation for Pakistan, shifted the power balance in South Asia.
And the Simla Agreement came after that.
Yes, in 1972. It aimed to establish a framework for peaceful relations, emphasized bilateral negotiations, renamed the ceasefire line to the line of control. But it conspicuously failed to resolve the core issue of Kashmir.
So another agreement that sort of agrees to disagree on the big stuff. Got it.
Pretty much. It became more of a mechanism for managing the conflict than actually solving it. And Pakistan suspending it in 2025 shows just how much faith, or lack thereof, they had in it delivering.
Right. And then there's Kargil in 99. I remember that one, things got pretty tense.
Kargil, 1999. Pakistani soldiers and militants infiltrated the Kargil Heights in Indian-administered Kashmir, high up in the mountains. India launched a counterattack, pushed them back. Pakistan eventually withdrew under intense international pressure, particularly from the U.S.
And that was after both had nuclear weapons.
Exactly. This was the first direct armed conflict between two declared nuclear powers. It was a stark reminder of just how dangerous this rivalry could become, especially since it happened right after a major peace initiative, the Lahore Declaration. Severely damaged trust.
It's like a never-ending soap opera, but instead of dramatic reveals and love triangles, you've got artillery fire and potential nuclear Armageddon. So, wars, disputed territories. What else is fueling this seemingly eternal conflict?
The persistent and highly contentious issue of cross-border terrorism. India has long maintained that Pakistan actively supports and harbors terrorist groups, especially those operating in Kashmir. We're talking about groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba or Let-e, which means Army of the Pure, and Jaish-e-Mohammed, Jam meaning Army of Muhammad.
And Pakistan's official line is always not us.
Officially, yes.
Yeah.
They consistently deny state-level involvement, though there have been whispers and acknowledgments from some Pakistani officials in the past about connections with certain organizations. You know how it is.
Sure. And there's a long list of major terrorist attacks that India has pinned on Pakistan-based groups, isn't there?
Tragically, yes. The 2001 attack on the Indian parliament, the horrific Mumbai attacks in 2008, the Pulwama bombing in 2019. Each incident sends relations spiraling downwards, leads to diplomatic crises, military standoffs. It's a major obstacle to peace.
Okay, so India sees Pakistan using these militant groups as a kind of deniable asset, a way to stir trouble without using their actual army. That's asymmetric warfare, right?
That's the Indian perspective, yes. A type of conflict where the sides have very different capabilities, and Pakistan allegedly uses non-state actors to challenge India's stronger conventional military. They see it as a way to bleed India, to keep the Kashmir issue on the boil, without risking a full-scale conventional war that they would likely lose.
But that strategy can backfire, can it?
Oh, definitely. It often backfires on Pakistan, drawing international condemnation and providing India with justification for retaliatory actions, which undermines any peace initiatives.
Which brings us right back to the 2025 Pahalgam attack that supposedly triggered Operation Sindoor'. It's a vicious, never-ending cycle of attack and revenge.
It really is. And it fuels populist sentiment on both sides, hardens political stances.
Now let's talk about something seemingly less explosive. Water. Surely they can agree on sharing water, right? It seems so fundamental.
You'd think so, but even that's a source of tension. Surprisingly, there's actually a pretty robust agreement in place. The Indus Waters Treaty, or IWT, signed way back in 1960, brokered by the World Bank.
Wait a minute. A success story in this whole saga of spats? Color me surprised.
A qualified success, perhaps. It's remarkably resilient, having survived 3 wars, and is often held up as a model of international resource management.
How does it work?
Well, the treaty divvies up the waters of the Indus River system. India gets control over the eastern rivers, Ravi, Beas, Satluj, while Pakistan controls the western rivers, Indus, Jhelum, Chenab. India can use the western rivers for certain non-consumptive purposes, like hydroelectric power, but under strict regulations.
Seems reasonable enough, so what's the problem now?
The problem is recent tensions have been bubbling up because India has plans for more hydroelectric projects on those western rivers. Pakistan is worried this will reduce the water flow downstream, which is absolutely critical for their agriculture-based economy. India even formally requested to modify the treaty in 2023.
And then in 2025, things took a dramatic turn, right? India actually suspended the treaty. That's like turning off the tap on your neighbor.
It was a really dangerous escalation, a massive step. It weaponized a cooperative mechanism that had held for over 60 years. India explicitly linked the suspension to Pakistan's alleged support for cross-border terrorism after the Pahalgam attack.
Wow.
This is a major strategic shift, turning a shared resource into a political pressure point, opening a whole new front beyond just military stuff.
So it's not just about bombs and bullets anymore, it's about water rights too. That's a whole new level of strategic maneuvering. What was the reaction to that?
Predictably heated. The Indian Foreign Secretary, Vikram Misri, made it clear that India wouldn't reconsider unless Pakistan credibly dismantles cross-border militant groups. He said, unless Pakistan credibly stops cross-border militancy, India won't reverse the suspension.
Tough stance.
Very. Meanwhile, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif shot back, stating that any attempt by India to block or divert their water would be considered an act of war.
Yikes.
Yeah. This goes way beyond the usual disagreements within the treaty framework. The unilateral suspension itself is a coercive measure, fundamentally altering the nature of the issue.
Okay, so we've got the historical beef, the land disputes, the shadowy terrorism, the water wars. Is there anything else in this cocktail of conflict?
Oh yeah, I almost forgot the big one. The nuclear elephant in the room.
Indeed. Can't forget that. India first tested nuclear weapons in 1974, then again in 1998. Pakistan quickly followed suit with its own tests in 1998, officially making them both declared nuclear powers.
How many warheads are we talking about?
Roughly.
Estimates vary, But India is thought to have over 180 warheads, and Pakistan over 170. Both have diverse delivery systems, missiles, aircraft.
So they both have the capability to turn the region into a radioactive wasteland. That's comforting. What's their approach to actually using these things? Is there like a doctrine?
India has a declared no first use NFU policy, meaning they say they won't be the first to use nuclear weapons in a conflict. However, there have been recent indications, some debates within India, that this stance might be softening, or at least becoming a bit more ambiguous.
Blurring the lines. What about Pakistan?
Pakistan, on the other hand, does not have an NFU commitment. They maintain what's called strategic ambiguity, basically keeping their options open to deter India's conventional military superiority. They feel they need that ambiguity.
Strategic ambiguity. That's a fancy way of saying maybe we'll nuke you first, maybe we won't. Keeps you guessing.
Essentially, yes. They've also developed tactical nuclear weapons, or TNWs. These are smaller nuclear warheads designed for battlefield use, potentially to counter a large-scale Indian conventional attack, like the cold start doctrine people talk about.
Tactical nukes. That sounds like a recipe for, well, disaster on a smaller scale, but still disaster. Easier to use, maybe.
That's the fear. The nuclear capabilities cast a long shadow over all conflicts. It makes any military escalation incredibly risky, often prompting international intervention during crises.
So nukes keep the peace? Sort of?
Well, there's this concept called the stability-instability paradox. The idea is that while nuclear weapons make a full-scale war between the two, unlikely due to the catastrophic consequences, mutually assured destruction, basically this very assurance might create space for lower-intensity conflicts.
How does that work?
Each side might believe the other won't escalate to nuclear use over a limited conventional engagement, or a terrorist attack, or a cross-border strike. So, ironically, the nuclear umbrella might inadvertently permit or even encourage limited provocations or conflicts below the nuclear threshold.
Huh. That's counterintuitive.
It is. The Kargil conflict was the first direct clash between two declared nuclear powers, remember. And the 2025 crisis has once again raised fears of nuclear confrontation. Ultimately, nuclear weapons likely prevent all-out war, but might inadvertently allow for or even encourage these lower-intensity conflicts. It's a key lens for understanding the dynamics in this region.
So we've got this whole history of bad blood, flashpoints galore, and the looming threat of nuclear annihilation. Then, bam, 2025 rolls around, and the Pahalgam attack happens. Let's dive into the specifics of that and why it sent everything spiraling again.
Okay. The terrorist attack that took place in the Bizaran Valley of Pahalgam, a tourist spot in Indian-administered Kashmir around April 22, 2025, was the match that ignited this latest round of conflict.
And the casualties were high.
Tragically, yes. Reports indicated 26 to 28 civilians, mostly Hindu tourists visiting the area, lost their lives, and several others were injured. A horrific event.
India's reactions.
Swift and immediate accusation aimed at Pakistan. India, without hesitation, pointed the finger at Pakistan, accusing them of their usual MO, supporting cross-border terrorism. Pakistan, equally predictably, issued strong denials of any connection to the attack.
And who took credit for this horrific act? I recall hearing something about a group with a catchy name.
Initially, a group calling itself the Resistance Front, or TRF, claimed responsibility. This group is widely believed by security agencies to be a front for Lashkar-e-Taiba, Lati, the Pakistan-based group behind the Mumbai attacks.
Okay, so a known entity, possibly.
Yes. But then, in a bizarre twist, the TRF later retracted their claim. They blamed a cyber intrusion for the initial statements.
So it's like a terrorist version of, oops, wrong tweet. Regardless, the outcome was devastating.
Exactly. Whether the retraction was genuine or an attempt to muddy the waters, who knows? But the damage was done. The Pahalgam attack became the direct trigger for the 2025 escalation.
And the fact that they targeted tourists, especially Hindu pilgrims, that feels particularly pointed, doesn't it, given the context of Article 370 and India's effort?
Absolutely. Targeting tourists, particularly Hindu pilgrims in Kashmir, is a highly provocative act. India has been actively trying to project an image of normalcy and peace in the region, especially since the abrogation of Article 370. This attack directly undermines that narrative and serves as a stark reminder that the security situation remains fragile.
So the aim was likely to reignite tensions, to drag the Kashmir issue back into the international spotlight, and to basically scream, everything is not okay here.
Precisely. As one Chatham House analysis noted, as an elaborate move to puncture India's claims of restored peace in the Kashmir Valley, nothing could be more devastating than an attack on innocent tourists. The fact that the TRF, believed to be a proxy for less T, even made an initial claim, even if retracted, suggests organized efforts aimed at disrupting any semblance of calm. The timing and the target selection seemed designed to elicit a strong Indian reaction.
Which is exactly what happened.
Which is exactly what happened.
Okay, so India is understandably furious. The world is watching, probably with popcorn in hand. What was India's immediate playbook after this attack? Diplomatically, domestically?
India's response was swift and multi-pronged, starting almost immediately. On the diplomatic front, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri announced the suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty on April 23rd, that really drastic move we discussed.
Yeah, huge.
They also canceled visas for Pakistani citizens, recalled their diplomats from Islamabad, closed the Attari-Wagah land border, crossing a major transit point, and shut down Indian airspace to Pakistani aircraft.
Whoa, that's not just a slap on the wrist. That's a full-on diplomatic ice age.
Pretty much. Domestically, Indian security forces, military, paramilitary, local police launched joint cordon and search operations in the Pahalgam area to hunt down those involved. There were also reports, unconfirmed but concerning, of homes belonging to individuals suspected of involvement being demolished.
And security operations had casualties.
Yes. In a related incident shortly after, an Indian soldier was killed and 2 others injured in a gunfight in Udhampur, which also resulted in the death of a top Lashkar-e-Taiba commander, Altaf Lali. So immediate security responses too.
And the rhetoric from the top.
Very strong. Indian Home Minister Amit Shah vowed publicly that no terrorist involved in the Pahalgam attack would escape punishment. So these swift and harsh measures clearly signaled India's determination to make Pakistan pay a heavy price and set a firm stance for subsequent military action.
The IWT suspension really stood out, though.
It did. India's initial response went beyond mere verbal condemnation. It was a comprehensive, coercive strategy. Diplomatic isolation, economic pressure via border closures, and domestic security operations, all aimed at pressuring Pakistan internationally and building domestic support for more direct military action.
And they were briefing other countries, too.
Oh, yes. India actively briefed diplomats from various countries, emphasizing the cross-border links of the attack to garner international understanding and maybe even tacit support for its impending actions, laying the groundwork.
So India lays down the law diplomatically and domestically. Then comes the big guns, Operation Sindoor'. Paint me a picture of what went down.
Right. On May 7, 2025, the Indian Armed Forces launched Operation Sindoor'. This involved missile strikes targeting what India claimed were terrorist infrastructure targets. Not military targets, they insisted, but terrorist infrastructure.
Where were these targets?
At 9 different locations, according to India, in both Pakistan-administered Kashmir and, significantly, deep inside Pakistan's Punjab province. The targets reportedly included the Jaish-e-Mohammed JM headquarters in Bahawalpur and Lashkar-e-Taiba Litadi bases in Meridke.
So hitting known militant group locations, and they're saying they took out a significant number of bad guys.
That's India's claim. They reported killing over 100 militants, including a key GEM leader, Abdul Rauf Azhar, who's the brother of Masood Azhar, and supposedly 10 members of Masood Azhar's family. Big claims.
How did India frame this? Because launching missiles into another country.
They described the operation as targeted, calibrated, and non-escalatory. They asserted they deliberately avoided Pakistani military facilities to minimize the risk of a broader conflict. The spin was crucial.
What weapons did they use?
Reports suggested a mix. Indian Air Force Rafale fighter jets equipped with Scalp cruise missiles and ASM Hammer precision-guided bombs. Also ground-launched BrahMos cruise missiles and Indian Army Sky Striker loitering munitions, basically kamikaze drones.
Advanced stuff. How long did it last?
India claimed the entire operation was very quick, lasting only about 25 minutes. A swift, sharp strike.
Calibrate. That's a very carefully chosen word. It's like saying, we're hitting you, but we're being very precise about it, so don't cry wolf too much. But let's be real, launching missiles deep into Pakistani territory is a major escalation, right? Compared to previous strikes.
Absolutely. Operation Sindoor' was a significant military escalation. It went well beyond the scale and depth of previous so-called surgical strikes, like the one in 2016 or the Balakot airstrike in 2019.
How so?
While India attempted to portray it as a counterterrorism operation, the line between that and an act of aggression against another sovereign state can be blurry, to say the least. This operation demonstrated a clear evolution and escalation in India's strategic thinking.
More aggressive, higher risk tolerance?
It seems so. Compared to 2016 or 2019, Operation Sindoor' showcased multi-domain coordination, Air Force, Army assets, high-precision strikes, and crucially, a wider geographical scope, hitting targets across both Pakistan's Punjab province and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. This suggests a higher risk tolerance and a more punitive retaliatory resolve from India.
So a strategic shift.
An Observer Research Foundation, ORF analysis, called it just that. They stated the operation constitutes a high-precision offensive across multiple domains, marking a strategic evolution in India's approach to dealing with cross-border terrorism. The range of targets, Bahawalpur, Meerut, Sialkot, Muzaffarabad, and the claimed success rate indicate a scale and intent beyond previous actions. Plus, using top-tier assets like Rafales, Scorpions, and Brahmos reflects a higher level of military commitment.
Okay, so India has made its move. Pakistan, predictably, wasn't going to just sit there and take it, right? What was their response?
Absolutely not. Pakistan vehemently condemned Operation Sindoor'. They labeled it an act of unprovoked aggression, claimed India hit civilian areas, and even alleged a mosque was struck. They reported 31 Pakistani civilian deaths as a result.
Civilian deaths, that's a serious counterclaim. And they vowed revenge.
Immediately. And true to their word, on May 10, 2025, Pakistan officially launched Operation Bunyan al-Marsus, which translates roughly to solid structure, as a retaliatory military action. They said they were targeting multiple Indian cities and military installations.
And did they actually hit anything significant? I heard some wild claims about downed Indian warplanes.
Pakistan made some bold claims, yes. They claimed to have shot down multiple Indian warplanes, including some of India's most advanced fighters like the Rafale, MiG-29, and Su-30 MKI.
Did India admit to losing any planes?
No, India naturally denied these losses. However, it's interesting to note that some sources, including intelligence assessments cited in reports from the U.S. and France, apparently indicated that at least one Indian Rafale might indeed have been shot down or damaged, so conflicting accounts there.
The fog of war?
Yeah.
What else happened? Border clashes.
Yes, beyond the airstrikes, there were intense cross-border clashes along the line of control from late April right into May. Heavy shelling, mortar fire, heavy weapons, small arms engagements, the works.
And the drones. You mentioned drones earlier.
Right. A particularly notable aspect of this conflict was the extensive use of drones by both sides. It really ramped up. Each country claimed to have shot down hundreds of the other's drones.
Hundreds. Wow.
Leading some media outlets to dub it the first drone war between these nuclear-armed neighbors. Pakistan also specifically alleged that India was using Israeli-made Hirop loitering munitions in these attacks.
And Pakistan's targets.
Pakistan claimed their targets inside India included Air Force bases, specifically mentioning Udhampur, Bhuj, Pathankot, Bathinda, and another airbase in Punjab. They reportedly used high-speed missiles and other ordnance.
India's defense.
India, for its part, claimed that its Russian-made S-400 air defense systems, a highly advanced system they'd recently acquired, successfully intercepted Pakistani attacks. They even claimed they conducted a counterstrike against Pakistan's air defense systems near Lahore.
So a lot of claims and counterclaims, making it tough to figure out what actually happened on the ground or in the air. But it sounds like Pakistan definitely wanted to show they wouldn't be intimidated.
Absolutely. Pakistan's counteraction clearly demonstrated their resolve to retaliate, setting off a dangerous tit-for-tat escalation cycle.
And the drone warfare aspect is kind of a game changer, isn't it? More than just skirmishes.
It is. The large-scale deployment of drones by both sides was a significant new feature of this conflict. This represents a technological escalation beyond traditional shelling and small arms fire. It makes attacks more far-reaching, harder to definitively attribute sometimes, and potentially lowers the threshold for certain actions.
So the first drone war label might stick.
It might. The Indian Air Force even acknowledged using kinetic and non-kinetic means, meaning shooting them down or jamming them to take down Pakistani drones. Meanwhile, Pakistan claimed India launched a staggering 77 Israeli-made attack drones. This technological leap adds a new, complex, and potentially more persistent dimension to their border conflicts and these kinds of deniable attacks.
So while the missiles and fighter jets were grabbing headlines, it was the buzzing of drones that might be the real story here, changing the nature of the conflict. Now, beyond the military tit-for-tat, there was also a diplomatic slugfest going on, right?
Absolutely. The military escalation was mirrored by an intensifying diplomatic war. Pakistan basically reciprocated India's earlier diplomatic moves. They expelled Indian diplomats, canceled visas for Indian citizens, and closed their border crossings and airspace to India. Tit for tat there, too.
But they didn't stop there, did they? They took some pretty drastic diplomatic steps, similar to India's IWT move.
They did. In a very significant move, Pakistan announced the suspension of the 1972 Simla Agreement that key framework for bilateral relations we discussed, and they severed all trade ties with India.
Suspending Shimla. Oh, wow. And India was also active on the information front.
Yes. Meanwhile, the Indian government issued an order to social media platform X, formerly Twitter, to
Yeah.
block thousands of accounts within India. They cited national security concerns. This reportedly included accounts of some international news organizations and prominent users, which inevitably drew criticism for potential censorship.
So it wasn't just bombs and bullets. They were also trying to control the narrative and shut down communication channels, literally. These diplomatic actions sound like they led to a complete breakdown.
They did. These actions, echoing the military escalation, led to a near-complete breakdown of bilateral relations. Existing peace frameworks and communication channels just collapsed.
And the symbolism of suspending those treaties.
The symbolic significance of India suspending the Indus Waters Treaty and Pakistan suspending the Simla Agreement cannot be overstated. These were fundamental agreements that had underpinned their relationship, however tenuously, for decades.
It's more than just a temporary freeze, then.
Oh, much more. It represents a deliberate dismantling of bilateral conflict management and cooperation frameworks established over decades. This makes future reconciliation exceptionally difficult. Remember, the IWT survived 3 wars before this.
Unprecedented.
And Pakistan's suspension of the Simla Agreement, which established the principle of bilateralism in resolving disputes, might indicate an attempt to re-internationalize the Kashmir issue, to bring it back to the UN, perhaps.
So they're tearing down the structures meant to manage the conflict.
Essentially, yes. These actions removed existing communication channels and norms of behavior, pushing bilateral relations into an unknown and frankly more dangerous territory.
It's like they're not just fighting, they're actively burning all the bridges behind them. What were the key players on both sides saying as all this unfolded? You know, the politicians and the generals, their sound bites must have been intense.
Oh, definitely. Senior political and military leaders on both sides issued important statements that significantly influenced the situation and public opinion, often hardening stances and fueling nationalistic fervor.
Give me some examples from the Indian side.
Okay, on the Indian side, Prime Minister Narendra Modi praised the armed forces' precision and bravery in Operation Sindoor', and even postponed his scheduled foreign visits, signaling the gravity of the situation. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, as we mentioned, announced the IWT suspension and briefed the public on Operation Sindoor', framing Pakistan's actions as clear provocation. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh described Operation Sindoor' not as finished, but as a continuing operation, and ominously stated that India was fully prepared for future responsible responses.
Setting the stage for more.
Potentially. Home Minister Amit Shah reiterated his vow that no one involved in the Pahalgam attack would escape punishment, emphasizing India's resolve for retaliation. And the military spokespeople were very active. IAF spokesperson Wing Commander Vyamika Singh reported on downing Pakistani drones, the precision strikes, and actively refuting what they termed Pakistani misinformation. Army spokesperson Colonel Sophia Qureshi reported on continued attacks by Pakistani forces and even claimed damage to Indian Air Force bases from Pakistani actions.
Okay, and the Pakistani side. Equally strong rhetoric.
Absolutely. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif vehemently condemned India's strikes as an act of war, promised revenge for the civilian deaths Pakistan claimed, and lauded Pakistani forces for allegedly shooting down those Indian warplanes. Defense Minister Khawaja Asif had actually stated publicly that an Indian attack was imminent just before Operation Sindoor' was launched, trying to frame Pakistan's subsequent actions as self-defense or expected retaliation.
And their military leadership.
The Director General of Inter-Services Public Relations, DG ISPR, Lieutenant General Ahmad Sharif Chaudhry, was very visible, actively refuting Indian claims about drone attacks and providing Pakistan's version of their response to Indian incursions. Even the Chief of Army Staff, COAS, General Asim Munir, weighed in, stating that Pakistan would respond with full force to any further provocation. He also held a phone call with the U.S. Secretary of State, highlighting the international dimension and concern.
So a lot of tough talk from the top on both sides, designed to play well at home, but probably not helping calm things down across the border. Lots of posturing and narrative shaping.
Precisely. These statements from top leaders clearly aim to shape the narrative, rally domestic support, and send strong messages to the international community, often exacerbating tensions rather than de-escalating the situation. The military spokespeople in particular played a crucial role in managing the information flow and countering the other side's claims in what quickly became an intense information war alongside the military conflict.
And as always, the truth about what actually happened in terms of casualties and damage is likely buried under layers of propaganda. What were the competing claims?
Exactly. There were wide discrepancies in the casualty and material damage figures reported by India and Pakistan, and independent verification was incredibly difficult due to the ongoing conflict and media restrictions, including that Twitter blocking in India.
So what did India claim they achieved and lost?
Okay. According to India's claims, Operation Sindoor resulted in approximately 70 to over 100 militants killed, including those key commanders of Libya and Jem. They also claim to have shot down Pakistani F-16 and JF-17 fighter jets and numerous drones, as well as destroying that Pakistani air defense system near Lahore. On their own losses, India did acknowledge some civilian casualties on their side due to Pakistani shelling and confirmed some Indian soldier casualties in the initial border clashes, but denied losing any aircraft.
And Pakistan's version of the scoreboard.
Pakistan, on the other hand, claimed that India's Operation Sindoor resulted in the deaths of 31 Pakistani civilians and many more injured, strongly denying India hit only militants. They also claimed, as we discussed, to have shot down multiple Indian fighter jets, Rafales, MiG-29s, Su-30 MKIs, with those international intelligence sources, apparently lending some credibility to at least one loss. Pakistan also made unconfirmed claims that 25 to 50 Indian soldiers were killed.
Unconfirmed by India, obviously.
Right. And they claimed they destroyed Indian BrahMos missile sites, S-400 air defense batteries, and inflicted damage on Indian air bases and brigade headquarters. On their side, Pakistan acknowledged some civilian casualties and confirmed the capture of one of their paramilitary rangers and also the capture of an Indian Border Security Force, BSF, soldier.
So wildly different stories.
Wildly different. It's crucial to understand that these casualty figures are highly contested and are very much a part of the ongoing propaganda war. However, even with these contradictory reports, it's clear that there was a significant human cost on both sides, and civilians were tragically caught in the crossfire.
And the information war aspect was really prominent.
Definitely. The massive discrepancies in claimed losses, India saying no warplanes shot down, Pakistan claiming multiple, maybe backed by some external intel, India claiming 100 militant deaths, Pakistan claiming 31 civilian deaths from the same strikes, coupled with the Indian government's content-blocking orders on X, really underscore the intense information war. It made it extremely challenging for outside observers to get an objective picture of the ground reality. That's pretty typical of modern interstate conflicts, especially involving nations with sophisticated information control capabilities.
So a fog of war, both literally and figuratively. What was the rest of the world saying as these two were duking it out? Did anyone try to intervene, bang some heads together?
Well, there was widespread international concern and a chorus of calls for restraint following the 2025 India-Pakistan conflict. Lots of worried statements.
Like from the UN?
Yep. The United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, expressed his deep concern and emphasized that the world simply couldn't afford a military confrontation between two nuclear-armed states. He urged maximum restraint. The UN Security Council held a closed-door meeting at Pakistan's request, but no official statement or resolution came out of it. Typical gridlock, perhaps.
What about the U.S.?
The United States, under President Trump at the time, also voiced concern, expressed hope for a peaceful resolution, and offered assistance to both sides. Senior U.S. officials like Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance also urged de-escalation and reportedly engaged in diplomatic outreach. Interestingly, as we mentioned, U.S. officials reportedly assessed Pakistan's claims about downing Indian warplanes as highly credible, suggesting maybe some private skepticism towards India's official denials. But there were also hints that the U.S. was hesitant to get too directly involved.
In China, their neighbor.
China, ever the cautious diplomat, expressed concern, urged both sides to exercise restraint, reiterated its opposition to all forms of terrorism, a standard line, and offered to continue playing a constructive role in easing tensions. They also welcomed a fair and impartial investigation into the Pahalgam attack.
Russia, other big player.
Russia also voiced deep concern over the escalation, condemned terrorism, and called for restraint. The European Union, EU, condemned the Pahalgam attack, expressed serious concern over the escalating violence, and called for restraint, immediate de-escalation, avoidance of further attacks, and protection of civilian lives through dialogue. Similarly, the G7 foreign ministers issued a joint statement strongly condemning the Pahalgam attack, urging maximum restraint, immediate de-escalation, and direct dialogue. The UK's Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, described the tensions as deeply concerning and echoed calls for restraint and dialogue.
Any regional bodies weigh in? The OIC.
Ah, yes. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, reportedly at Pakistan's request, issued a statement expressing concern over the deteriorating security environment. They pointedly criticized India's baseless accusations against Pakistan and reaffirmed support for the Kashmiri people's right to self-determination.
How did India take that?
Not well. India reacted strongly, dismissing the OIC statement as preposterous, accusing Pakistan of manipulating the organization, and asserting that the OIC had no business interfering in India's internal affairs. So that created more friction.
Any other notable reactions?
Various other countries, including Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Japan, also weighed in. Saudi Arabia reportedly made some behind-the-scenes efforts to ease tensions. Iran offered to mediate. Japan condemned the Pahalgam attack and urged restraint. Turkey called for reason and supported an investigation. Numerous other regional and international actors also expressed their concern and called for calm and dialogue.
So a lot of diplomatic white noise, a lot of "we're very concerned," but not a whole lot of concrete action to stop the fighting. It sounds like the world was mostly hoping they wouldn't nuke each other and urging them to talk.
That's a fair summary. While there was broad international consensus on the need for de-escalation, the specific responses and underlying motivations varied. Direct international intervention seemed limited. De-escalation efforts primarily relied on the judgment of the conflicting parties themselves and communication through discrete diplomatic channels. And as you noted, some actors, like the OIC, clearly sided with one party, while major global powers appeared reluctant to become too deeply entangled, preferring to exert diplomatic pressure from a distance.
Okay, so we've seen the history, the buildup, the spark, the firestorm, and the international reaction, or relative lack thereof. What are the big takeaways from this latest, very scary chapter in the India-Pakistan saga? What are the implications?
Well, the 2025 conflict was definitely more than just another eruption of their long-standing animosity. It has profound implications for both regional and global security. First off, it significantly escalated instability in South Asia, bringing two nuclear-armed states perilously close to a wider war. That's the most obvious and worrying impact.
And the way they fought.
Exactly. The conflict also set a dangerous precedent with the use of advanced weaponry, including those strikes deep into enemy territory and the large-scale deployment of drones and warfare between them. That changes the game for future confrontations. Furthermore, the collapse of existing treaties, the IWT, Simla, and communication channels, has worryingly increased the risk of future miscalculations. Less communication, more risk.
And what does this mean for the future of their relationship? Are we looking at a permanent state of high tension, even worse than before?
It certainly looks that way in the near term. Bilateral relations have undoubtedly plummeted to a new low. The level of mistrust and hostility has deepened significantly. The prospect of a return to normalization through dialogue seems exceptionally challenging in the short to medium term. It'll take immense diplomatic effort just to restore or find alternatives to those suspended key treaties.
So the positions have hardened.
It appears so. India's actions regarding Article 370 in the Indus Waters Treaty, coupled with Pakistan's retaliatory suspension of Simla and trade ties, indicate a hardening of positions on the core issues that divide them. Less room for compromise.
So no easy path to reconciliation in sight. What about the underlying issues that keep fueling this conflict? Are they any closer to being resolved? Still all about Kashmir.
Unfortunately, the 2025 conflict really underscored the fact that the Kashmir dispute remains the central, unresolved issue driving this animosity. The historical grievances stemming from the partition, the repeated wars, and the persistent issue of cross-border terrorism continue to feed this cycle of conflict. The recent actions by both sides suggest a further entrenchment of their respective positions on these core issues, making any breakthrough seem highly unlikely right now.
So the outlook is pretty bleak. Is there any glimmer of hope for de-escalation or a path towards actual conflict resolution? Or are we just stuck in this cycle?
While the immediate outlook is definitely concerning, pathways for de-escalation and eventual conflict resolution still technically exist. They're just fraught with significant challenges.
Like what? What needs to happen?
Well, restoring some level of communication, even through discrete back channels, is an urgent necessity just to prevent further unintended escalation or accidents. That's step one. Third-party mediation could potentially play a role down the line, but honestly, this would depend entirely on both sides demonstrating a willingness to accept it, which seems unlikely at the moment given the rhetoric.
And longer term?
In the longer term, fostering gradual confidence-building measures might create a more conducive environment for dialogue, but this would require significant political will and leadership on both sides, which is often lacking when tensions are high. Ultimately, resolving the fundamental issues, particularly the Kashmir dispute, is crucial for achieving lasting peace. But as we've discussed, this currently appears to be a very distant prospect.
And the nuclear dimension in all this.
It's key. The fact that nuclear deterrence managed to prevent a full-scale, all-out war in 2025 shouldn't lull anyone into a false sense of security. It clearly failed to prevent a dangerous conventional military escalation.
So, the stability-instability paradox in action.
Exactly. The conflict demonstrated not only an increased willingness by both sides to undertake higher-risk military actions, Operation Sindoor', Operation Bunyan al-Marsus, but also a worrying deterioration of existing crisis management mechanisms, like the suspended treaties.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It's a dangerous combination. Heightened military adventurism plus weakened safeguards makes future crises potentially even more dangerous and harder to control. It significantly increases the risk of accidental escalation to a larger conflict, maybe even crossing the nuclear threshold unintentionally. As some analysts noted, this situation creates a high risk of accidental escalation, with both countries facing new existential questions, making the situation more prone to future crises.
And the drones add another wrinkle.
Right. Finally, the emergence of what's being called the first drone war adds another layer of complexity. It potentially lowers the threshold for conflict by making attacks more far-reaching and sometimes harder to definitively attribute, further complicating response decisions and escalation control.
So, to recap, deep-seated historical grudges, a perpetually simmering Kashmir issue, cross-border terrorism accusations flying back and forth, water disputes turned weaponized, nuclear weapons casting a terrifying shadow, and a recent conflict that brought them dangerously close to the brink, featuring new drone warfare tactics and the shredding of old agreements. It's a wonder anyone in the region gets a good night's sleep.
Indeed. The fragility of peace in South Asia remains a critical concern, and the persistent threat posed by this deeply entrenched animosity, coupled with the presence of nuclear arsenals, cannot be overstated.
So here's something to really keep you up at night, something to mull over. Given the breakdown of established treaties like the IWT and Shimla, and this increasing use of advanced military technology like drones, which blurs the lines of responsibility and maybe lowers the barrier to conflict, what does the future of conflict management even look like in this incredibly volatile region? Are the old rules of diplomacy and crisis communication even relevant anymore when you're dealing with this level of deep mistrust and rapidly advancing military tech?
That is a profoundly important and, frankly, deeply unsettling question to consider. Where do we go from here?
Definitely food for thought, or maybe more like a geopolitical anxiety snack. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you, our listeners, to continue exploring this complex and critical issue on your own.